Hey everyone, welcome back and thanks for tuning in. Khabib is more than just a UFC champion. His MMA career has been tremendous and he's known for his brutality inside the ring. In today's video, we'll be talking about why so many fighters are scared of Khabib. Don't forget to let us know what you think down in the comments and subscribe to the channel. Let's dive in. Khabib maintains a mentality of a Dagestan warrior. Khabib was the youngest of 3 children who grew up in a harsh environment in Dagestan, Russia. Dagestan, which is located near Kashkais, is a country with a terrible history and a simple way of life. Growing up in a setting like this means you'll develop a warrior attitude and an iron will from an early age. Khabib grew up in Dagestan like other children, preparing for combat and being mentored by a father figure. Abdulmanap's father, Abdulmanap, had become a master of freestyle wrestling methods and a coach who had already raised a slew of talented wrestlers at the time. As the story goes, he persuaded Khabib to begin wrestling training when he was just 8 years old. Khabib grew up in a devout household, grappling on the mat and competing around the country. However, via wrestling and competition, he was able to adopt the Dagestani warrior attitude. Khabib, as a devout Muslim, must always act in accordance with his Islamic beliefs and upbringing. He still resides and will always live at his father's house, believe it or not. Khabib, on the other hand, feels it as his responsibility as the family's youngest son. He too is not a wealthy individual. Winning, family pride, and God are the only things that matter to him. This all may seem strange to you and me, but it says a great deal about his commitment to the MMA sport and the steely determination he brings to his battles. Any rival fighter will find it difficult to fight against a man who was born and nurtured with the goal of destroying people like you. Khabib is known to train like a madman before his fights. If you follow Khabib on Instagram, you'll notice that he's constantly with a group of about 10 people. These individuals are his training partners and pals. They're also some of the top MMA fighters and wrestlers on the East Coast. They exercise 2 to 3 times per day, sleep and eat together, and are true fighting brothers. Khabib trains at Dagestan for part of his fight camp, as well as at AKA in California for the other half. When he's at home, he does a lot of jogging in the mountains on difficult terrain and will train at a higher altitude. He does this to increase the number of his red blood cells, so he can fight back at the regular level with stronger cardio. Khabib, as one might assume, spends a significant amount of time honing his wrestling abilities with the top wrestlers across the globe. Imagine him practicing twice or 3 times per day at a high altitude with 10 of the finest wrestlers in the world. But that's why he has crazy cardio and frequently appears to have the energy to run at a fast speed for 10 rounds. But make no mistake, the second part of his professional fight camp in the United States is just as difficult. Khabib has spent a lot of time at AKA since entering the UFC, preparing for his battles under the guidance of Xavier Mendez, a well-known coach. He practices with considerably bigger teammates over there, including UFC heavyweights Cain Velasquez and Daniel Cormier. That is, after all, as strenuous as mountain training. Khabib benefited greatly from his preparations in both Dagestan and the United States. He understands that in order to be at the top of his game, he must live and practice with his people. However, training in AKA helps him to fill in the gaps in his game and construct a flawless plan with the game's masterminds. Khabib's pressure through striking. Despite finishing most of his rivals with submissions, Khabib was an underappreciated striker. He's faced some of his division's most deadly strikers and always won. Khabib even managed to knock down Conor McGregor with his overhand right move, something other strikers have failed to achieve. Despite this, many MMA fans and sometimes even analysts claim Khabib is a bad striker. Sambo's punch mechanics and appearance are often likened to classic boxing techniques. A great boxer flows and moves with grace, but Khabib's hitting is harsh around the edges. Khabib excels at closing the gap on opponents that prefer to battle from the outside. The way he achieves this is by being really cautious and seeking for an opportunity. He throws a lot of punches to keep his opponent busy and prevent counterattacks while assessing the situation. During the opening rounds of a match, Khabib uses his jab to exhaust his opponent's physical and mental endurance. He'll utilize his jabs to narrow the distance and start wrestling once he senses his opponent's exhaustion. Power is a frequently ignored characteristic of Khabib's striking. His punches are smaller than in regular boxing. His reach, build, and style all contribute. Expanding his punch range marginally increases his offensive shell but reduces his defensive shell. Khabib's short arms help him to deliver rapid combinations, follow-ups, and blocks if his opponent responds. Khabib's takedowns, clinch game. Khabib's prominence in the mixed martial arts was largely due to his great clinch skills and takedown effectiveness. He was able to knock down competent attackers, including those with special grappling defense training. When he was a small boy in Dagestan, his dad, the late Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, educated him about fighting philosophy. Khabib's Sambo, unlike other kinds of wrestling, stresses the use of the cages and legs as a method of offensive. Other grappling sports, such as as U.S. wrestling and jiu-jitsu, typically use the arms to dominate the rival, as well as the legs to aid in submissions, whereas Sambo does the reverse. Sambo warriors use the legs to dominate their opponent's legs, and the arms to hit and submit their opponents. Khabib attempts to place his head on his opponent's hip, which correlates to the leg he is attempting to pull down. If he were to go for his opponent's left leg, he should also place his head on the left side of the hip. This gives him control of half of his opponent's body, allowing him to go in for numerous trips while working him to the ground. Khabib would frequently body lock his opponent, exhausting their energy and putting them down with a judo-style hip throw. After off-balancing his opponent with a punch or a grappling motion, he steps across his opponent's center line. After an attempted takedown, most competitors utilize the cage as leverage to climb back to their feet. Khabib takes the other approach and uses the cages to throw his rival off balance. He can respond to what his opponent does after he gets them against the cage. He can shift to the hip throw described above, or he can step around and grab a figure 4 grip on one of their legs while holding one of their arms. Khabib has insane leg control. Khabib's leg wrap is one of his hallmark moves. He tightens and compresses his legs from around the bottom half of his opponent's legs while stretching the remainder of his torso toward their head after pinning them to the ground. This puts tremendous pressure on his opponent's knees, thereby preventing them from escaping or exerting any power on the ground. It's critical to prepare your legs to maintain the required squeezing pressure for 25 minutes. Partner exercises or solo sets squeezing a weighted heavy bag will help you achieve this. Khabib's smash ground and pound technique. During Khabib's time as lightweight champion, his ground and pound technique has been an incredible force in the featherweight class. Khabib searches for ways to end the fight after his legs are wrapped around his opponents. He frees his hands by using his legs to dominate his opponents, allowing him to hit their face and body, preventing their effort to defend and allowing him to slip out of the mount. Surprisingly, Khabib appears to favor striking over submission to end his opponent. It's quite hard to deal with Khabib because of these small stylistic elements. Another tactic that Khabib uses is psychological warfare. During the ground and pound, Khabib is known to speak to his opponents, telling them to surrender and that he deserves to win. This dramatically demoralizes his already damaged opponent, leading to a surrender. Khabib's domination is demonstrated by his utilization of techniques along with his tremendous mental pressure, even when compared to top-tier UFC fighters. That's all we have for today's video. What do you think about Khabib's insane training camp and methods? Would you be able to do some of them? Do you agree that Khabib is one of the greatest MMA fighters in the world? Let us know down below in the comments.